Hi everyone, Sean Waldman with Secure Cyber, and this is your weekly cyber update. Well, there's a lot in the news today, and the first article that we'll talk about is the Windows Downdate tool. The Windows Downdate tool lets you unpatch Windows systems. Bleeping Computer put out an article about this with a lot of detail involving how it works. There was a security researcher at Black Hat that revealed this for the first time. Basically, there are two CVEs that can be compromised. Microsoft has patched one of them. The second one, Microsoft has put out various recommended workarounds in order to maintain the stability and the security of your systems and how to detect it. So if you'd like more information, go down into the description and click on the Bleeping Computer article, which then has a link out to the Microsoft article that explains everything that I just talked about. Dick's Sporting Goods is still recovering from a cyber attack from a week or two ago, shutting down email systems and also locking out user accounts. However, the SEC filing indicated that there was no material impact, meaning that there seems to be no impact to store operations, and everything has been going as normal. It was interesting to note in the article that in order to restore email access for employees, that the IT department was requiring webcam verification to verify who you were before they turned it on. So that was kind of interesting. The U.S. government has issued an advisory on the Ransom Hub threat actor, allegedly the organization that was responsible for the Halliburton oil attack. The government advisory from CISA just indicates some indicators of compromise as well as some other tactics that they've used that you can use to protect your systems. And this is the same group that has been targeting a lot of the critical infrastructure in the U.S., as well as water and wastewater facilities, government entities, and so on. So if you don't have a method of ingesting these types of bulletins that include indicators of compromise, those are IP addresses, domains, file hashes, and those types of things, you definitely need to look at your systems that you're using or the vendor that you're using and make sure that they have a way of doing that. This is an interesting article. There was an article that came out last week about Chinese threat actors that were infiltrating U.S. internet service providers as well as managed service providers. Apparently, Volt Typhoon, which is a Chinese threat group that has been very active in critical infrastructure attacks as well as recon inside U.S. networks, was using a vulnerability that was in Versa Director, which is a piece of software that is used by managed service providers and internet providers to manage networks. They were leveraging a vulnerability which has since then patched in order to spy on that type of activity. Now, they were using this to pivot and to get access to many other devices downstream inside the network. So not necessarily anything specific to attacking the Versa software itself, but using that to pivot in order to get recon access to a lot of the downstream clients. So you may say, hey, these are really cool articles, but the company patched it, so it's over. This is the problem. The problem is that a lot of these situations are patched fairly quickly. And you can go on the internet right now and see that Versa is basically screaming, please patch this. However, as we've seen with many other critical vulnerabilities, it is up to the individual provider in order to, or customer, to patch that system. Guys, we see patches, we see vulnerabilities that have been leveraged for patches that were issued 5 years ago. So there doesn't seem to be a streamlined system for getting the notification, applying the patch. I don't really get the disconnect. I know that there are various reasons why that might happen, but in today's age, definitely keeping track of vulnerabilities is something that is very critical. Another article that came up was the Toyota data breach, and I know if you Google Toyota data breach, you'll find a lot. This one happens to include some information on endpoint security. So the article is basically about a breach to Toyota that was to a third party, so not to Toyota directly, but Toyota is indicating that there was a third party that was compromised. And it was utilizing that particular threat actor used a piece of software called AD Recon. And AD Recon is a freely available piece of software to any IT administrator or infrastructure administrator in order to audit Active Directory. So this just emphasizes, and the article goes on to emphasize how important it is to have endpoint detection and response, or EDR, on every endpoint. And I know that this is a struggle for a lot of organizations. Being able to say that you've got EDR on every endpoint, number one, is the first challenge. So you don't have the right auditing, you don't know what the systems are, you don't have good access to inventory to know what all the systems are in order to get this on every endpoint. And then for FortiEDR, which is what we use as an organization, sometimes it's a challenge to work with customers to make sure that they've got it in protection mode versus a simulation mode, because maybe it's learning an update that it just had, or they're trying to troubleshoot some type of connectivity issue on the endpoint. So I just leave you with these recommendations. Number one, definitely make sure that you've got an ability to communicate with your provider, or you've got the documentation from your EDR software to make sure that you've got the ability to audit your network and see what has EDR on it and what doesn't. So if you're using an RMM tool, being able to write a query that looks for every endpoint deployed to see if it's got EDR on it. Now, this also requires you to have a process to make sure you've got every endpoint with your RMM tool on it in order for you to see it. So there's a big challenge there, because you don't want a weak link out there. You don't want a device that doesn't have EDR on it. So just make sure that you've got EDR deployed, it's in a healthy state, it's active and deployed, and that you're keeping very close track of the devices that you have in some type of simulation or downgraded mode in order for troubleshooting. Because in a fully armed, fully configured, EDR deployed active endpoint, something like an AD Recon shouldn't be able to deploy or be utilized. Most of your EDR software should be screaming at that point that there's a tool like that being used on your network. The last article we're going to talk about today is the Iranians are very active. So we've reported a little bit on this show about Iranian threat actors, especially into the election that's coming up. There is evidence to support that they're setting up even more infrastructure, this time with command and control. They could be actively looking to deploy some ransomware. But folks, if you look at everything that's going on today with the Middle East, with Russia, with our election coming up, you've seen a lot of articles about cyber attacks to critical infrastructure. I know that's been an emphasis of this channel, trying to get awareness out to just let everyone know that our infrastructure is very fragile, and there's a lot of opportunity for nation-state attackers to take advantage of us. And this is just a really good time to just mention, not trying to scare anybody, but folks, have 30, 60, 90 days worth of ability for you to survive without help. So, there's a lot of resources online that you can get to that can guide you through this process. Ready.gov is definitely one that does a fairly good job of explaining. I think they actually recommend 30 days, but if it were me, I would be looking at 90 days. I'd be looking at, definitely water is probably one of the first things to store. And there's some calculations on how many people are in your family and how much water is required. And then food and money, right? Definitely having a good first aid kit, and those types of things. So it's not a scare tactic. It's not a doomsday scenario. It's in case our critical infrastructure becomes unavailable for a short period of time, or I'm not talking the lights are going to be out for a year. Just make sure that you've got some background, and you've done some of your own research in order to make sure that you're prepared. That's all I'm saying. That's all we have for today. Thanks for watching. I'm sure it'll be a busy news cycle. I know we've got a little bit of a cutoff due to the holiday weekend, but hey, let's be careful out there.